Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with hosts Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please look us up on your favorite podcast app, subscribe, like, and share so that you never miss an episode. If you'd like to further support us, visit patreon.com/speakingout and check out the different rewards. You'll find exclusive rewards if you sign up as a patron of the podcast. Thank you for your support, and let's get into the... Welcome to this week's podcast. Thank you again to our patrons who make this podcast possible. We could not do this without you, and we love our patrons. You can sign up at patreon.com/speakingout. It's kind of a mouthful.
Yeah, it is.
And then you can look at the different tiers. There's some really cool different rewards and different amounts. So as little as $5 a month, you can support us on Patreon and keep this podcast going. So we were talking, and we wanted to start a series that really helps people to identify who wolves are, what they are and who they are, and how you identify them. Because to us, this is really the heart of why we podcast. We've obviously had a lot of guests on the show, some really incredible guests. We've kind of given space for people to tell their stories. But the heart of what we do and what we really started this podcast to be is something that gives you practical tips to be able to safeguard yourself and your family and your kids and your grandkids and people who are, kids who are in your charge. People have wanted us to talk about domestic violence and emotional abuse and spiritual abuse and, on and on and on and on. And we've really kept a tight rein on that. We've talked some about it, but our specialty is child sexual abuse.
Right.
And, we were kind of talking and we said just a little bit ago, and we said, the advocacy community has kind of, in my opinion, dabbled in so many different things and has gotten so political that it's just they've really lost their focus.
Yeah,
and we don't want to do that.
No. And I like what you said. We have kept a tight rein on our
I think we need to
on our original mission and purpose.
Yeah.
Yes. So we are going to be for the next several weeks actually focusing on the nitty-gritty of all of this.
Yeah.
The identification of a wolf.
Yeah.
What is a wolf? How do we know? How can we identify? And what do we do about these wolves?
And we want to do this too, building kind of a theological foundation, because I feel like the heart of the issue in the church begins with really faulty theology. And unfortunately, because there's never been a good foundation, a good biblical foundation, churches are just full of crap all over the place. That's just a fact. And what that does is I think it creates so much spiritual damage to people who once believed. And we were talking about that too.
Yeah.
In advocacy, we see many people completely give up on their faith in God. And I'm fully sympathetic to that, for sure. But I think that's not to put the blame on the survivors. That's to put the blame on the church and to say your theology has been really screwed up from the very beginning. And so it's no surprise that people no longer believe in God. You've taught a really
Jimmy,
false God.
Way back when we began this podcast, we did a whole series on the foundation. And I think it's good for us to return to that because with anything, I don't care what it is, with a shaky foundation, it will never stand.
Right.
And that's especially true of our faith, of our relationship with God, of our relationship with each other, within the family, within the community, within our churches. With a crumbling foundation, that foundation is going to fall.
Yes.
So we want to go back to the very beginning again and rebuild on that. We're going to talk about, a firm foundation, what that is, what a wolf does, how a wolf can invade that foundation or try to, what we can do to prevent it. But we will be using scriptures and, biblical teachings along with our own perspective of that,
Yeah.
but it'll be based on Scripture.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't have to be a believer
No.
to like, this isn't something that you should be like, oh, well, they're talking about God and faith, and so I'm going to tune out for the next several episodes. These are really genuinely practical things. Even if you're a full-blown atheist, I mean, you will glean
Right.
a lot from this.
Oh, yes.
We're just coming from a theological perspective, because I think the Bible has a lot to say about protecting innocent people, and this whole notion that God is this welcoming God who wants to welcome everybody into the church is total nonsense. It's a flat-out lie, and there is zero scriptural basis for that. And I think we've caused a lot of damage to a host of innocent people by kicking the doors open to the church and saying, well, we'll just welcome everybody in the
Yeah.
name of Jesus.
That
That's just stupid.
that false teaching, and it is a false teaching,
Absolutely.
has caused a lot of harm to a
Yeah.
lot of people, a lot of innocent people. You're right. And those of you who are survivors or thrivers of abuse, you understand it, you get it. When the churches just have an open door policy, it's been very harmful to most survivors of abuse.
And innocent people. It just
and
makes no sense.
innocent
It makes no
people,
sense
right?
when you know that
No.
you have somebody who's a criminal, a hardened criminal, a repeat offender. It makes no sense why you would kick the doors open and be like, hey, we're gonna allow you to come in, but we're gonna have these secret covenant agreements just between the leaders
Or we'll just
and
keep
you.
a careful eye out.
Right. And we'll
doesn't
just
work.
cross our fingers
Yeah.
and hope for the best. And it makes no sense.
No.
So when we talk about wolves, the Bible uses that term a lot, and so we're going to talk in terms of wolves, and I want to lay down three truths that are found in Scripture about wolves. And again, I want to remind you that when the Bible describes wolves, it never ever talks about inviting them into the sheep pen. It never talks about welcoming them. It never talks about grace, mercy. Those words are absent always when talking about wolves.
It's guard, stay away, keep
Avoid.
out, avoid.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All of
So
those
so you'll
words,
find
right.
that language and destruction. Their end is destruction. You'll find that language really present throughout the Bible consistently. And again, I want to remind you that when the Bible describes wolves, it's not describing what they do. It's not describing their behavior. It's describing rather who they are.
And I think
And they
that
do
is
not change.
key. That is key to understanding all of this, because behavior can eventually be changed.
Right.
But the heart of a person will not this person, not
That's
a
right.
wolf, will not be changed. And we'll see that throughout this whole study as we get deeper and deeper into it. You'll understand more what that means.
So behaviorally, when behaviors can change, that's why you find people like the prostitute who's wiping Jesus' feet with her tears and her hair. She anoints his feet with oil. That's why you find Jesus radically defend her.
Right.
And also tell her in the end, your sins are forgiven. Go in peace. Jesus talks about mercy for people like her whose lives are full of sin. He's describing behaviors. He's not describing who that person is, but he is, in those instances, describing what they do.
I was thinking back in the Psalms, Jimmy, with David, when he speaks of a broken and contrite heart. And there's a difference between the hardened heart and the woman who washed Jesus' feet with her tears and dried them with her hair. Her heart was broken and contrite, sorrowful, truly, truly sorrowful.
And her actions reflected
right, absolutely. And Jesus always accepted that person.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. So when the Bible talks about wolves, these are three hard truths that I've found. Number one, they have not, they do not, they will not, and they cannot ever change. Therefore, their end is destruction. And that's why you have passage after passage that talks about, including John the Baptist when he introduces Jesus, he says, "Behold, the axe is already laid to the root of the tree. Therefore, any tree that does not produce good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Jesus repeats that in Matthew chapter 7, starting in verse 15, I believe it is. Jesus repeats that verbatim, and he talks about the difference between a good tree and a bad tree. And he says, the good tree cannot produce bad fruit. And the bad tree cannot produce good fruit. And by the way, Jesus' language, it's pretty strong, but he calls them ravenous wolves. And he says, their end is destruction. Therefore, they will be cut down and thrown into the fire. And he says, you will recognize them by their fruits. So again, it's this notion that they have not, they do not, they will not, and they cannot ever change. And so therefore their end is destruction. It's not invitation. It's not welcoming. It's not Bible study. Their end is destruction. And so the Christians are instructed, avoid such people.
I know there are probably people who bristle at that thought and think, impossible.
Everybody's capable of change. That's not true. That's not a scriptural
and see,
idea.
That's where we get hung up right from the very beginning, because in our human minds, we want to think that everybody can change. And we also want to think that everybody really deep down wants to change. That's not true.
Right,
Everybody
exactly.
doesn't want
Everybody
to change.
has good somewhere in their heart. No, they don't.
Not everybody. Right. Not everybody.
There are people who there's no good in their heart.
And they're happy with that. They're
exactly right. They thrive on that.
Happy with that. Exactly right. And I think the more you and I have been involved with people of all different kinds, we've seen wolves, and we know the heart of a wolf you can pick it out. It's there. And there are really people who like being a wolf. That's
Absolutely.
who they are. That's their identity. And they're proud of their behavior, and they're not going to change.
Now they won't say that, and I think that's that's the difference. Is people who are really just kind of crappy people who have bad behaviors, and maybe who have a temporarily hardened heart. They don't really try to hide it.
No.
They're just rough around the edges. And I've known people who are just mean, who were just awful, miserable people, but who, if you actually talk to them, you find out, like, all right, they're rough around the edges, and I mean really rough around the edges, but they're kind of a diamond in the rough,
I call them mean as a junkyard dog, but after, when you bring them kind of under your wing and get to know the heart of them, when you actually can...
They're teachable. They have a teachable spirit.
There you go.
And that's the difference between a wolf. See, a wolf will never admit that he's a wolf. In fact, he goes out of his way to pretend that he's a sheep, that he's something that he isn't. And that's why they're so dangerous.
Right.
That's why they blend in so well.
Exactly.
And so that's point number 2. They blend in exceptionally well, which is how people are continually fooled by them over and over and over and over and over again. The church invites people back in knowing full well what they did. I mean, we're talking hardened criminals who spent time in prison. And the church leaders will say things like, well, isn't it a shame that they went down this path and now they did their time?
They did a couple
found
poor
Jesus in
choices.
prison.
They made a couple poor choices. And they repented. They're sorry for it. They paid their debt. Let's give them a chance.
With no proof that that's the case.
Right.
And that's what bothers me.
Right.
I'm all for it. If somebody wants to say that somebody's changed their life, great. I'm all for it. But show me the proof that's in the
Sadly,
pudding.
we don't have any data that proves that abusers change.
No, there's none.
We really don't.
Yeah. No. And I think biblically, this notion is really strong.
Right.
That when you get to that point where you're capable of raping young children over and over and over again, multiple victims, how do you come back from that? There is no changing that. You are a disgusting human.
When I watched the movie, give me the name of it, and I'm terrible at names, that you were narrated some, or you were...
Oh, the Sins of the Amish.
Yes. When I began watching that, my whole body tensed up. I had really a lot of trouble watching portions of that because I saw children and they looked so innocent. And I'm thinking, I cannot imagine a father, a brother, a cousin, an uncle, a man standing over a young child and repeatedly raping that child day after day after day after day. Who does that?
But not only that, I mean,
Who does that?
our good friend Mary Byler, who was in, she was in Sins of the Amish, and
Mary
one of the
was,
main
she's
stories was her
amazing.
story.
Yes.
Her brother, one of her brothers, she was abused by her biological father, her stepfather, if I remember right, and her brothers.
Right.
Her one brother went so far as to remove the hinges off the door that she would
Right.
lock,
Yes.
and then go in
Tried
and
to
rape her.
barricade herself as a
And-
young child and could not protect herself.
I mean,
from this.
how is there an ounce of good in
There
a
isn't.
person like that?
There
There's
is
not.
not.
I mean,
There is
he's a piece of
not.
crap
Yeah.
and always will be. And that's what, like, I have no problem saying that at all. As a minister,
heart
I have
that
no
could
problem
do
saying that. He's a piece of crap.
heart that could do that. That's not a mistake. That's not sliding off track.
That's right.
That's
He's an evil,
that's
wicked person, and he always
intentional
will
wicked. Yes. Yeah.
be. He won't change because he
No.
hasn't changed, and he doesn't want to
No.
change. And so point number 3, it's our duty to avoid them and to keep them out of the sheep pasture, period.
Right.
It's not our duty to love them and to kill them with kindness and to love our enemies and to pour heaping coals on their head by giving them food and water. Jesus wasn't talking about people like this in that context.
You know, if we watch animals, we learn a lot from nature. I have a mama cat, 2 baby kittens. Her protection over those kittens blows me away. She is awesome. She really, really is. For one thing, she hid them for the first 5 weeks of their lives. I have no idea where they were outside. No idea, but they went through snowstorms, wind and rainstorms. But here, one day when she decided that I was safe to show her kittens to, she brought them up and dropped them literally in my hand. So I was safe. I was okay. But when there is anything that comes to that slightly bothers her, she takes those kittens and they disappear for days. She's protecting them. And it can be another child. She just doesn't know. She doesn't say, oh, so you're a friend of, the one I trust, so you must be okay too. No, she doesn't do that. She hides her babies for periods of days
until
at
she's
a time.
certain that it's safe.
Right, until she is certain. And she always comes out first. Never does she allow her children with her. And I watch that cat over and over and over again, and I think, man, that's how we're supposed to protect our little ones.
Right.
That's what the Bible's talking about.
Exactly right.
That's what we need to be doing. Watching out for all the wolves. She's watching constantly. Her eyes are always going. And at the slightest even thought of danger, she gets those cats and kittens and they're out of there. They are out of there.
I mean, to take that analogy a little bit further, what I see is in the church, I see the mama and daddy cats seeing a wolf come in and coming up and start purring and rubbing, like when cats are being friendly and they want pet, rubbing up against the wolf, and then abandoning her kittens and leaving the wolf with her kittens.
Right. And
I mean, this is
leaving,
exactly what the church
That's
is doing.
So opposite of what we're supposed to do.
And
so totally opposite.
And then we're shocked whenever the wolf strikes, and we're like, oh my goodness, we never saw this coming. Are you stupid?
Yeah.
I mean, that's my first response now.
Well,
are you
is.
stupid? Of course they're going
right.
to strike again.
Again, if we just watch nature, how they protect their young, it's incredible. Why, if they can do it, why are we not doing it?
Right.
Why do we have this? Oh, everything's safe, everything's good. We'll allow them back in. They're cute. They're nice. They speak.
Look how
really
good
nice.
they teach the Bible. Look how well they know the Bible,
Right,
and they're
right.
such nice.
No,
they're such nice people.
No,
they're not. No, they're really not.
No.
They can pretend to be nice, but they're
Right.
not nice people.
Well, an animal,
People who
if
rape
you
children are not
watch,
nice
you watch
children.
these
They're not
animals,
nice
they can
people.
lay low and pretend they're nice. I
Right.
watched it happen to one of my farmer cats who got struck in the neck and killed instantly by another animal. And it made me sick. It just made me sick. This poor cat thought that this other animal was going to be friendly and struck it right in the neck, and that was it. And I thought, man, you never let your guard down. We're never supposed to let our guards down.
Right.
Ever.
And there's nothing
Ever.
wrong with that. I mean,
no, there's not.
I've had so many people tell me, well, that's just not the Christian thing. And
Yeah, it
I
is.
I could never live my life like that. I always being paranoid. That's not being paranoid.
No.
That's being vigilant.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Being paranoid is being uninformed and always looking over your shoulder.
Always worrying. But
Right.
Yeah. What kind
That's
of
being
person is
paranoid.
that? Right.
Being informed and being vigilant is a really, really, really biblical concept. And when you identify people, and we should be able to identify wolves, and we should be able to call them what they are, unapologetically call them what they are, and say, you're a slimy wolf, and you're right,
Well,
and get out.
Jesus, when he talked about the Pharisees, and I mean, he did not mince any words.
No.
He didn't have a problem calling them whitewashed.
Whitewashed tombs. Yeah.
He had no issue with that. He called a spade a spade. So, I mean, and we don't need to go around calling people names.
Why not?
Every now and then, maybe it helps.
Why not? Okay, so Mom and I developed this thing, and we've never shared this publicly. There might be a video of this on my website under the videos tab. I don't even know, but anyway, we've kind of updated it. But it's a predator recognition tool. We developed this in 2018. And no, it's not been scientifically proven. This is just based on our observations. So it's not like you can use this thing and this is black and white and it's guaranteed that you're going to find a predator.
Foolproof and all, but
that's not what it's
guide.
intended to do. Right.
It's a good guide.
It's just another tool in the tool belt that shows you these indistinguishable patterns that child sexual predators have. And of course, this can kind of convert to other types of abuses, but we developed this specifically, very specifically, for pedophiles, child sexual abusers. And so keep that in mind, and you can kind of use this however you want. Again, this is not like gospel. This is fact. This is how all abusers behave. These are just kind of general patterns that we've witnessed and experienced over a decade, and we see this with virtually all child sexual abusers. So we're going to be going through this over the next several episodes, but I want to start with a couple notes on this, and we can put up some of the visuals as we do these episodes for the YouTube video.
I think the visuals are real good, actually.
Yeah.
I think that would be helpful for people to actually see.
Yeah. So we put a note, at the very beginning, we put a note on persistence, because this is something that we see is incredibly concrete with 100% of abusers. They are all persistent, where you and I, we will wear out over time. If we have something, even strong-willed people, if we have something that we want, eventually, say it's a new car or whatever it is that you have your eyes fixated on, eventually you're going to wear out. You might not have funding. You might have banks that deny you. You can't get a loan. Whatever it is, eventually, you're still going to want that car, but you're going to give up on the idea after a while. Because you're like, okay, it's an impossibility and I can't get it. Abusers don't do that.
No.
They're so persistent, and their persistence is always at the forefront, always. So Merriam-Webster defines persistent as continuing to do something or try to do something even though it is difficult or other people want you to stop.
That's interesting.
See, that's the difference between us and abusers.
Yes. Right.
Somebody tells us to stop, you're going to stop.
Right. I'm going to stop.
And I know the things that get under my wife's skin. I know them well. I still do them, but I know what they are. And I know she doesn't even have to tell me. She just has to give me the look. And I don't keep doing it.
Yeah.
Because I know
Back
it
down,
irritates her,
right,
you know?
right.
Like, and it's just silly things, little habits that I have. But they annoy her. And whistling is one of them. She does not like whistling. I like to whistle. For whatever reason, that sound just grinds on her. So when she tells me to stop, guess what I do?
Well, you
I
stop.
stop.
Right.
Because
Well, out
I'm
of
not gonna-
courtesy, out of respect.
Exactly right.
You're not
Exactly
gonna keep
right.
doing something to grind against her and
Exactly right.
agitate and just,
So abusers don't stop. And then the other definition, Merriam-Webster, is continuing beyond the usual, expected, or normal time, not stopping or going away. Boy, if that doesn't describe every abuser who's out there, I don't know what does.
wow, it does. There's nothing that deters an abuser.
No.
Nothing.
No.
In fact, I think we will determine later on, part of the challenge and thrill of an abuser is just this wearing down process
Yes.
to where they can actually achieve the unachievable.
They can
with a
achieve
person.
exhaustion.
Right.
And that's what this paragraph here, I think you actually were the one who wrote this paragraph, and I think it's just so powerful. I'm going to read it in full. Perpetrators are persistent in every aspect of their lives. People who live with them find themselves continually worn down,
Right.
exhausted, and most often they don't know why. How about the word gaslighting?
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
That comes to mind.
Perfect. Yes, yes.
Persistence is what allows perpetrators to continue to gain access to hundreds of victims. Because of their persistence, they do not, will not, and cannot stop. They simply shift their focus to new victims. It is precisely because of persistence that this tool works. Perpetrators hide many things, but their persistence gives us definitive actions that the people closest to perpetrators can identify and monitor. And that's where the words come to mind when Jesus said in Matthew 7, he says it twice, you will recognize them by their fruits.
Right.
These ravenous wolves, you will recognize them by their fruits. Why? Because they don't give up.
They don't. They do not. All of you who are listening, if you know an abuser, you know what we're talking about. You absolutely know what we're talking about. They don't back down. They will not stop. The persistence is enough to make you crazy, and sometimes you think you are crazy.
And sometimes you do go crazy.
And sometimes you do go crazy.
Sometimes you legitimately
Right.
find yourself depressed, anxious, having panic attacks,
Well, the
having
whole
forms of
exhaustion.
PTSD.
Yeah, you got it. Yes. Terrible. Terrible.
Simply by living with one, even if you don't know
Right.
for certain that they're an
That's
abuser,
what it is. Right.
you're feeling the effects of that
You are.
persistence.
Oh, yeah. I think if your dad, he could wear anybody down.
Yeah.
He just wouldn't back down no matter what it
I know.
was. And
Ever.
the more you said it bothered you, the more he did it. The more
But he would
did
do it in ways that were really manipulative and
Slick
sly.
and sneaky, and then pretend
And he'd be like, "Well, I didn't do
and
that."
then pretend just like that. Yeah.
But you did. You just found another avenue
Yeah.
to do it where technically you weren't doing the thing that bothered me.
Enough to
But-
make you
but you
question
were.
yourself, or to think, well, I guess maybe he didn't mean to do it. Yeah, he did. Yes, he did.
Right.
He's very intentional with his
Right.
conniving ways. Abusers are very intentional.
Yes.
They just that's another fruit that we'll talk about later on, but they're extremely intentional with what they do.
Yeah.
But very smart about it.
Yes. So we'll wrap this one up there, but I wanted to lay those foundational truths down. And again, they are, number one, they have not. So in other words, in the past, they have not, they do not, meaning currently, they have not, they do not, they will not, and they cannot ever change. Therefore, their end is destruction. Number two, they blend in exceptionally well, which is how people are continually fooled by them. And number three, it is our duty to avoid them and to keep them out of the sheep pasture.
Amen.
We've got to be able to identify them. And if we can't identify a wolf, I'm telling you right now, we're in big, big trouble. And it's not easy. I'm not going to say it's like, oh, well, I just pick them out of a crowd like that.
I think intuitively, though, and we'll get into that, intuitively, God has instilled within us something that says something's not quite right with that person.
Exactly.
And puts we can put our antenna on right away and kind of,
Yes.
Okay.
So this is just giving you
an introduction to what's
kind of some teeth to that idea that, our intuition sometimes isn't enough because we're like, I can't quite put my finger on it, but something's not right with this person. Well, it's great that your intuition is kicked up, but unless you can identify very specifically what that person is doing, what boundaries they're violating, you're not going to stop them. No. You're not going to slow them down.
Right.
And in fact, you're not going to be able to avoid them.
Exactly right.
Because you're going to be like, well, how do I kick somebody out of church or out of the home or whatever it is, just based on a feeling? Well, the reality is you can't.
Right. I think that's a good point, Jimmy, and that's why it's so important to have knowledge like this, set boundaries first before the wolf enters the sheepfold.
Yes.
Really. The whole intent of this is to help keep the wolf out.
That's right. So hopefully you guys will find this really helpful. There's so much information packed in here.
I'm excited about this. The next few weeks are going to be very good.
It's good. It's good
when
stuff.
Jimmy and I put this together, we worked very, very hard on this, dug deep. We had researched tons, used our own intuitive information, our knowledge from experience, and put this together. And this has been presented in workshops, several workshops.
And multiple abusers who abused their entire lives and nobody knew had been identified. One of those, there was an article in the Christian Chronicle, and I'll link to that in the description of the podcast. But this guy was outed. It was the very first church that I had ever presented this tool at. And within days, I got a phone call about this individual. Well, his name is Clyde Brothers, so he's in the article, so there's no reason to hide his name. He's a predator. He's a disgusting predator who actually went to jail because I presented this.
Yes, and so this tool is valuable. It's very valuable. Yes.
Yeah.
And
so
we're excited
we can identify
it.
wolves.
Right.
We can, and we should, and we need to.
Oh, we need to. Yes.
So
absolutely.
So we're excited to share it with you, and we're glad you guys tuned into this episode, and we'll see you next round.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. A special thank you to our patrons who make this podcast possible. Please help us get the word out by searching for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. Please consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron and check out the rewards our patrons receive.